4:31 p.m. The Boeing 747 that will become TWA Flight 800 to Paris arrives at JFK. It's 25 years old and has more than 16,000 flights under its belt. Tanker trucks move in to fuel up the plane. The ground crew pumps 114,000 liters of Jet A fuel into the 6 wing tanks. It's more than enough to fly to Paris. The biggest tank, the center wing tank, can stay as it is, almost empty. 6 p.m. 212 passengers board Flight 800 in good time for a 7 p.m. takeoff. In charge of the crew this evening is Captain Stephen Snyder. With 4,700 hours of flying time on 747s, he's one of TWA's most experienced pilots. Flying alongside Snyder is Captain Ralph Kevorkian, another TWA veteran. 7 p.m. Captain Snyder and the flight crew are ready to go. But there's a problem. One of the passengers is not on board, but her bags are already in the hold. In 1988, Pan Am 103 exploded in mid-air over the town of Lockerbie in Scotland, killing 270 people. Terrorists checked a bag containing a bomb into the hold, but didn't board the plane. Since then, planes cannot take off with a bag in the hold if the passenger who checked it is not on board. The plane is delayed while ground staff hunt for the missing passenger. Outside, it's 28 degrees Celsius, and on the asphalt of the apron, the jumbo is getting hot. As the minutes tick by, air conditioning units under the fuselage keep the passengers cool. 50 minutes go by, and there is still no sign of the mystery passenger. At 7:59 p.m., gate personnel contact the crew.
TWA Flight 800, sorry about that delay. We have confirmation that the passenger is on board. They were on board the whole time.
8:19. At last, Captain Kevorkian throttles up the 747. Flight 800 lifts off an hour and 20 minutes late. TWA 800's flight path will take it through some of the most congested airspace in the USA. It will also skirt the boundary of a U.S. military zone to the south. Air traffic control keeps flights well clear of any restricted airspace during weapons testing.
TWA 800, heavy New York departure, radar contact, climb and maintain 11,000.
8:31. Flight 800 climbs into the evening sky. Eastwind Airlines pilot David McLean is flying a 737 into Trenton, New Jersey. He sees the jumbo jet ahead of him.
It was a nice night, good visibility. There's a lot of traffic going out there, so you always got to keep your eyes out.
Air traffic control clears Flight 800 to climb to its next level.
TWA 800, heavy turn left heading 050, vector climbing around traffic.
Climb to 15,000.
Crew and passengers settle in for the flight. Then, suddenly,
And I thought, gee, it must have 200 to 300 people on board. I thought it was a bomb.
at air traffic control, Flight 800 suddenly disappears off radar screens. Eastwind's pilot David McLean reports in to air traffic control.
We just saw an explosion out here, about 16,000 feet. Just went down into the water.
Air traffic control tries to raise Flight 800 on the radio.
TWA 800, if you hear center, ident.
There's no response.
TWA 800. If you hear center, I did.
The terrible truth starts to dawn.
TWA 800 center.
Thousands of meters below, a helicopter from the Air National Guard flying on a training mission is caught beneath the blast.
I looked over my right shoulder, and this fire exploded across the sky and came down like a curtain, like napalm.
Flaming aircraft debris starts to fall all around them.
Some of it was still on fire. We actually saw embers.
Now the helicopter crew is in danger. If debris hits the rotor blades, they too could crash into the water.
We have to get out of there.
The helicopter makes it away safely. They race to get help. First on the scene is the Air National Guard rescue helicopter. The sea below them is on fire. A small armada of 40 Coast Guard boats plus police and civilian craft joins the search. In the darkness, rescuers scan the wreckage for signs of life. "9:30 p.m. The news is filtering back to staff on the ground at JFK. TWA begins to contact relatives of the crew and check the list of passengers. Meanwhile, reports of the disaster start to break on the news channels.
This is the latest we have on the flight that crashed tonight of TWA Flight 800 into the waters off Long Island, New York. This was on its way.
Among those watching are Aurelie and Walter Becker. They realize it's the flight of their daughter, Michelle.
The first pictures you saw were shot from the helicopter with the debris field and the flames coming out of the water. And I said, oh my God.
747 aircraft has exploded in midair about 20 miles south of New York's Long Island into the Atlantic.
Rescue, we know, is a nightmare. They are looking for people who survived this.
5 a.m. The sun rises on an ocean littered with the remains of Flight 800. Boat crews bring pieces of wreckage to the Coast Guard station at East Mauritius. Rescuers have recovered 73 bodies, but no survivors. Jamie Hurd's father, Jim, realizes that any hope his 29-year-old son made it through alive is gone.
It's not a good time in your life. You know, you're just really thinking about one thing. And to me, the one thing was that I was going to go get Jamie and bring him home.
News reaches the FBI and New York Assistant Director James Kallstrom. Kallstrom immediately suspects the crash is no accident.
My gut told me that this was probably an intervention by some criminal, some terrorist.
Kallstrom recalls the loss of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie in Scotland 8 years earlier. Terrorists blew apart the Pan Am plane, also a 747, with a bomb planted in the hold. It was the first time terrorists had brought down a U.S. airliner. Now Flight 800 may have fallen victim to a second terrorist attack. If so, how did the terrorists get the bomb on board?
It could have been a carry-on bag. It could have been a piece of luggage that was stored in the belly of the plane. It could be cargo.
The FBI launches a major criminal investigation. Within hours, hundreds of agents and police rush to the coast. Less than 12 hours after Flight 800 plunged burning into the water, investigators survey the impact site. Even hardened law officers like Kallstrom are shocked by the destruction.
I'll never forget the scene of miles, seemed like miles of debris.
Pilots who were near the jet when it exploded tell FBI agents that the blast came out of the blue. But witnesses on the ground report something highly suspicious. Over time, 258 people tell the FBI they saw something streaking through the sky at the moment the 747 was lost. 2 people even caught an image on camera. One photo shows a mysterious trail in the sky. The other appears to show an object shaped like a missile. Karlstrom faces a horrifying possibility. Was Flight 800 shot down by a terrorist missile? Such an attack just a few kilometers off the US mainland would represent a new escalation of the terror threat facing America and the West. The US supplied shoulder-held ground-to-air missile launches to Islamic freedom fighters in Afghanistan. Karlstrom knows that many of these weapons are now in the hands of terrorists determined to strike at America. But the launches only have a range of 8 kilometers. Since Flight 800 came down 13 kilometers from land, a missile of this type could only have been fired from the interview 670 eyewitnesses. They painstakingly check the movements of 20,000 craft in the area. They seize stolen and abandoned boats and run forensic tests on them. But they can't find any promising leads. Then the missile theory takes a new and astonishing turn. Stories and rumors begin to circulate on the internet and in the press. They make an extraordinary allegation that TWA Flight 800 was shot down not by terrorists, but in a terrible accident by the US military. The FBI knows that Flight 800 did skirt the edge of an active military weapons fire zone, Whiskey 105, an area of several thousand square kilometers south of Long Island. The Navy routinely uses it for training exercises and on occasion does fire missiles at special airborne targets. Could one have struck Flight 800 in a catastrophic targeting error? The FBI's James Karlstrom goes straight to the top at the Pentagon.
So I had a conversation the next day with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Charlie Kazvili, and told him that we were going to need the absolute cooperation of all the military services.
Karlstrom learns that there were 8 military ships, 8 submarines, and 5 military planes within 550 kilometers of the crash site. A P-3 plane and a sub were in the middle of training exercises. He orders dozens of FBI agents to scrutinize all their logs. After weeks of checking, they verify that no missiles were unaccounted for. No missiles were fired that night. The FBI also check out the 2 suspicious photographs. They find that in one, the photographer was facing in completely the opposite direction to Flight 800. Technicians conclude that the object captured is actually an airplane. They also find that the mysterious trail on the other is simply residue on the film. The FBI concludes that the friendly fire theory is groundless. Since the day after the crash, Navy divers have scoured the debris zone in the deep waters off Long Island. It's slow and dangerous work. The seabed is littered with razor-sharp fragments. 6 days into the search, and there's no sign of the black boxes. It's possible that ocean currents have buried them in the sand. Then, on day 7, a diver spots something. A flash of orange.
The cockpit voice recorder. That's it. You see the beacon right on it? You want to take a picture of it? Right.
It's the cockpit voice recorder. Within seconds, they get lucky again. The flight data recorder lies just meters away.
They got both of them? Holy cow!
Divers quickly bring the boxes to the surface. To prevent damage by oxidation, they keep them submerged in salt water. But there's a problem. The boxes are twisted and broken open from the massive impact. Investigators fear that there's little chance the tapes inside will have survived. but they rush them to NTSB headquarters. There they hope they can retrieve something from the recorders. Carefully, they remove the cockpit voice tape from inside the armored casing and thread it onto a player. Against all the odds, the tape is intact and playable.
TWA 800, heavy turn left heading 050, vector climbing around traffic.
Left 050, climb vector.
They carefully analyze all the pilot's conversations and the readings from the data recorder.
Stop climb at 13,000. And the electric.
They scour the last seconds of the recording for any clues to the plane's sudden loss.
Climb to 15,000.
But at 8:31 and 12 seconds, the recording cuts off suddenly. Whatever happened to Flight 800, the pilots had no time to react. The excitement of the find turns to bitter disappointment.
The voice recorder, and the same with the data recorder, really told us nothing.
Now the investigators must rely entirely on the salvaged wreckage of the doomed jet for clues. Every fragment of the plane must be brought back to shore so that they can study it in detail. Week after week, Navy salvage ships work to recover every piece of TWA 800. NTSB teams scrutinize the debris as it's lifted from the ocean. They load the wreckage onto flatbed lorries and drive it 32 kilometers to a hangar in Calverton, New York. Here, investigators analyze the debris for any trace of explosives. If Flight 800 was brought down by a bomb or a missile, it would leave evidence behind. NTSB metallurgists examine the fragments under scanning electron microscopes. They're looking for the distinctive micro-pitting which high explosive leaves on metal surfaces. As a veteran of the Pan Am 103 investigation, metallurgist Jim Wildey knows exactly what bomb damage looks like. But he finds no trace of it.
We looked at every piece, every square inch of every piece, every fracture, every surface. Each piece as it came in was examined in detail for evidence of a bomb or explosion, and there simply was no evidence of that type on the TWA aircraft.
6 months after the disaster, the FBI has found no evidence of a missile strike or terrorist bomb. Now the NTSB focuses on catastrophic mechanical failure as the likely cause of the crash. It takes them 3 months to complete the center section. The fuselage is riddled with fractures. To trace where the plane's breakup started, Wildey first needs to calculate the sequence of the fractures.
All of these early fractures stem from one location, and that was right here in the fuselage, just in front of the front spar, near the bottom of the airplane.
The fracture sequence allows Wildey to work out how the plane broke up. The fractures underneath the plane radiate out, tearing away part of the belly of the plane. With the bottom of the fuselage gone, new fractures race upwards on both sides of the jumbo jet. When they meet, the nose is torn away from the rest of the plane. Now Wildey must find what triggered the initial fracturing. He looks behind the spot where the fractures begin. It's the site of the 747's biggest fuel tank, the massive center wing tank. It's as big as a 2-car garage. Panels of aluminium, called spanwise beams, divide the space into sections. Wildey hunts for clues.